Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. You know, the world's great chess masters all have one thing in common. They can envision the game unfolding many moves ahead. In other words, they're not thinking about which chess piece they're going to move next. They're thinking about which one they're going to play 15 moves down the line. They say that some even know how the entire game will unfold the moment their opponent makes the opening move. Yet, they can't just skip to the end of the game. They have to make one move at a time until the game reaches checkmate. You know, prophecies like that. Though the Bible tells us how it's all going to end, we can't just skip ahead. We have to watch the whole scenario unfold, one event at a time. And over the past few days, events have unfolded at a rapid pace. We're now seeing a realignment of nations, once thought impossible, or at least unlikely, into the very groupings the prophets predicted for the last days. And most importantly, we're literally witnessing the entire world turning against Israel. Today, I'm going to expose some lies, some hypocrisy, and the big lie that has driven it all. Helen Thomas is often called the Dean of the White House Press Corps. She has covered every presidential administration since President Dwight Eisenhower. Hers is the coveted front and center seat in the White House press briefing room. Thomas retired from UPI in 2000 after 57 years on that job. She then became a columnist for the Hearst newspaper group. She continued to write about the White House and national affairs. Arguably, there is probably no journalist in America who has had greater influence on the American public's perception of foreign affairs during much of her last 65 years. Now, especially when it comes to U.S. policy concerning Israel. On Monday, Helen Thomas announced her resignation from Hearst newspaper group and her retirement from journalism. Her abrupt retirement came just days after the public became aware of comments she made at a White House event celebrating Jewish heritage. A rabbi who was soliciting responses from various attendees encountered Ms. Thomas outside the White House. When asked if she had any comments about Israel, she had this to say.
Any comments on Israel? We're asking everybody today. Any comments
Tell them
on
to
Israel?
get the hell out of Palestine.
Ooh. Any better comments than that?
Remember, these people are occupied, and it's their land. Not German, it's not Poland.
So where should they go? What should they do?
They go home.
Where's the home?
Poland.
So the Jews,
Germany.
The Jews go back to Poland and Germany.
And America and everywhere else.
Thomas made her outrageous comments on the very day a flotilla of so-called aid ships departed Turkey bound for Gaza. On May 27th, a group of 6 ships carrying 10,000 tons of alleged humanitarian aid was dispatched by Turkey to run Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli government contacted each ship's captain and the non-governmental organizations supporting the flotilla, as well as the Turkish government, which appears to be the de facto organizer of the mission. Israel offered to allow the shipments to be offloaded in Ashdod to be inspected for contraband weapons and equipment. The legitimate aid supplies would then be transported into Gaza under the supervision of the sponsoring aid organizations. The requests were ignored, and the flotilla continued steaming toward Gaza despite warnings that Israel would not permit it. When the flotilla was about 80 miles from the Gaza coast, they were ordered to follow the Israeli Navy escort into Ashdod or be boarded. When they refused, the Israeli Navy boarded the first 5 ships without incident. Israeli commandos rappelled aboard the 6th ship, the Mavi Marmara, from a hovering helicopter. Some of the commandos were armed with paintball guns for crowd dispersion. Now that's an important detail that gets left out of most news reports. Not anticipating armed resistance, the Israeli commandos were armed with non-lethal paintball guns in addition to their standard sidearms. But when the commandos boarded the Mavi Marmara, they were ambushed by a waiting mob. The activists swarmed the individual commandos, attacking them with knives, metal bars, real guns, and at least one firebomb. The entire incident was captured on videotape. One can see the peace activists using iron bars like sledgehammers to rain down blows on the outnumbered Israelis. One soldier was thrown from the top deck to a lower deck 30 feet below. Several others suffered gunshot wounds. When the commandos were at last allowed to use their sidearms, the resulting battle left 9 activists dead and others wounded. Yet everyone insists on referring to the flotilla as a humanitarian mission. The United Nations, the United States, the Turks, and especially the media, everybody that is except the mission's organizers. A spokeswoman for the Free Gaza movement said the group's goal was not humanitarian. It was purely political. The goal wasn't to deliver humanitarian aid. After all, plenty of that is transported across the border every day by the permission of the Israelis. It was to break Israel's blockade. Free Gaza spokesperson Greta Berlin admitted to reporters in Cyprus after the clash, "What we're trying to do is open a sea lane between Gaza and the rest of the world. We're not trying to be a humanitarian mission. We're trying to say to the world, you have no right to imprison 1.5 million Palestinians." But despite the admission of the organizers, the world's media likes the humanitarian aid narrative best. So, never mind what's true. That's the story they're telling. Helen Thomas was merely explaining why. The international community reacted to Israel's boarding of the blockade runners as if the Israelis had torpedoed a Red Cross hospital ship. They were immediately declared guilty without the facts. This is why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the UN and the EU leaders hypocrites. He said that the world pronounces Israel guilty until proven guilty. France asserted that nothing could justify the military operation against a humanitarian initiative. Sweden, Greece, Iceland, Germany, Denmark, and Italy also criticized Israel in varying degrees. Catherine Ashton, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, called for the lifting of the Israeli blockade on Gaza. The EU is rushing to convene an emergency meeting to discuss the ramifications of the Mavi Marmara incident. Spain, the current EU president, branded the storming of the flotilla unacceptable. But what would be acceptable? Israel isn't occupying Gaza. In 2005, Israel pulled completely out of Gaza, removing every Israeli citizen and civilian and every remnant of Israel's military presence. Gaza's inhabitants didn't celebrate their liberation. They attacked their liberators. In their first free and open elections, they chose Hamas as their rulers, knowing full well what they were. Hamas is an organization that, according to its charter, exists for the sole purpose of ending Israel's existence. It has no other reason for being. Hamas has now conducted an unrelenting terror campaign against Israel for 5 years, firing more than 7,000 rockets into Israeli civilian centers since Israel withdrew. Under international law, a nation is permitted to blockade an enemy port to prevent that enemy from obtaining war materials to be used against them. In 1940, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt ordered a blockade of oil shipments to Imperial Japan. Any effort to run the blockade was deemed under international law to be an act of war. In October 1962, President John F. Kennedy ordered a blockade of the Soviet ships heading into Cuba. Had the Soviets attempted to run the blockade, they would have been sunk in accordance with the rules of war under international maritime law. Israel sent commandos armed with paintball guns to board a shipload of alleged peace activists attempting to run a military blockade. The commandos barely escaped with their lives. And the world blames Israel for the violence? Give me a break. Everything's turned upside down. I'll have more after this message. Folks, we've just completed a major overhaul of our website, hallindsey.com, in order to bring you more convenient news and perspective than ever before. Here, let me show you what I mean.